Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the public forum, which is held prior to the extraordinary meeting of the 26th of June. According to my run sheet, 6 people have registered to speak. If I could ask everyone to turn their mobile phones off or onto silent, and remind the speakers that this is being broadcast. And it's publicly available, so it's direct, and you can watch reruns later of both council and the public forum. The first speaker is Mr. Keneally, who I understand speaking on behalf of a number of people. Mr. Keneally wants to come forward. Has someone shown you how? Thank you. Look, don't rush. You've got plenty of time to say what you want to say. There's normally 3 or 5 minutes. I don't stick to that rule. Just take your time.
But
well,
we'll
take
get
your
through
time.
it. We'll get through it. And with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I will read out the vast majority of what I'm due to say. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, and through you to your council, I represent the 10 respondents whose objection and written submissions in regard to item 8.1 of the agenda were forwarded to your governance officer at 2:22 p.m. yesterday. We object to the report of Garima Menderata, labeled the Bowral Riverfront Greenway, and included in the agenda as item 8.1. We raise that objection for 2 reasons. The first is on a point of order, and we are questioning why the required 6-week community consultation period has been dispensed with. On this basis alone, we move that the agenda item should be removed and or not voted in today. The second objection is to the wording of the officer's recommendation in the said report that puts, to use the common expression, the cart before the horse, and essentially by doing so wastes ratepayers' money. The respondents respect, however, that council should investigate projects that appear to be absurd at face value, and so move that the officer's recommendation is varied to read as follows: that council commence due diligence investigations, including a cost analysis on the feasibility of constructing a bicycle path that joins Bong Bong Common and Cecil Hoskins Nature Reserve to the emerging Bowral South New Living area along the Winch Caribee Riverfront, the so-called bicycle path. Should these due diligence investigations conclude that the bicycle path is feasible, that council then engage the community prior to making a final decision, and thereafter, and only if appropriate, council undertake negotiations for the required land acquisitions.
Could I just stop you there? You've got that written out. You can hand me that in a minute.
I will hand that to you. No problem at all. These changes, if effected, would mean that the cart would no longer be before the horse, and that the absurdities in this proposed plan of action, the bicycle path, should be found as quickly as possible before any thought is had to forced acquisitions of the respondent's property. What follows are some particular objections and problems with the concept of the bicycle path itself. It's common cause that this council has no money to waste on frivolities, and due diligence is costly. Council effort should therefore be on projects that offer the broadest community benefit and not the benefit to one particular development. Council's efforts should be on projects that fall within available budget without shackling ratepayers with years of future debt. Council should therefore be applying its mind to community input on the proposal to obtain the knowledge, alternatives, and a view of the risks and damages and disadvantages of the proposed course of action. Council should further be applying its mind to alternative strategies with similar benefits, to the inevitable damage that will be done, the money it has available to fund all viable projects, and only then, on due diligence, and only thereafter, as I said, on the forced expropriation of the respondent's land. Despite our hopeful assumption that the submissions that were submitted yesterday will actually be studied in great detail, I summarize as follows. Feasibility of the project hinges on flooding in the area that was not considered by the bicycle strategy of 2008. It is important to give due weight to the next sentence. The entire proposed bicycle path is subject to regular and severe flooding. If you look at the annexes to the submissions that were presented yesterday, that makes it very, very painfully obvious. A flash flood on a 5-kilometer bicycle path with only one entrance and one exit to that bicycle path means drowned children. We have just seen $350,000 allocated to raising 6 areas of existing bike path on the Bong Bong cycleway. These are due to drainage problems and not flooding. I would like the council to imagine what the cost of constructing 5 kilometers of raised cycleways is going to cost. I'm sure council in time will apply its mind to finding out what that number is, but one can assume that it is not going to be cheap. This is before we apply the cost of the expropriations, which, given the nature of the properties in concern, are going to be significant. If council cannot already conclude that construction is not financially feasible, then, as I said before, please consider the significant costs of the land expropriation as set out in the written submissions and pay particular attention to some of the subpoints in there that indicate items of value that would be lost, which would all be claimed as part of the compensation required for the expropriations. The type of construction that would be required to withstand the flooding when placed over the wetlands over which it is intended that they are expected to go will, in our opinion, be environmentally unviable. And there is a good possibility that this course of action will fail at that juncture as well. It's important as well to realize that the 2008 bicycle strategy on which this pack of cards is balanced did not give prominence to this project or this portion of the overall project at all. It barely got a mention in that report. And finally, an evaluation of the alternatives to the project has not been done. In this meeting today, I believe you're going to vote to declare 33 projects to the value of $9 million. This is excluding the Mossvale bypass. That's why I say 33 and the 9 million, that being the remainder once you've removed the Mossvale bypass, and that you're going to declare those 33 projects as being unfunded. Of course, time will tell if that vote goes one way or the other, but one can certainly expect that it might go towards being unfunded. Yet in this meeting now, you would like to vote on pursuing a bicycle path which the respondents would view as being a nice to have at best, which I think we can reasonably estimate is going to cost in excess of the $9 million. This is the $9 million with which you could fund those 33 projects or 33 similar projects in the future. That must be a very difficult decision to make. In the circumstances, the community would be right in questioning the very motives as to why this course of action is even being considered, let alone proceeding to action. We therefore urge the Council to take the following steps. Please read the written submissions and kindly respond to them in writing. Then, having read those submissions, if you proceed, kindly open up the proposal for community consultation before taking any steps. Obtain your flood, your risk, your environmental, your heritage, and your indigenous studies as another necessary step along the way as you choose to follow the path of this proposed bicycle path. Read your own flood reports in order to see just how bad the flooding will be along the proposed path. Evaluate the type of construction required and the cost thereof including the cost of the expropriation, consider the cheaper alternatives to this project, and then relegate this nice-to-have project to the box labeled unfunded, and spend our money on something more valuable and more worthwhile, for example, childcare facilities, which are sadly missing in this area. In conclusion, then, we move that the Council does not adopt the report, and should you vote to adopt the report, the movement is then that you adopt the report in its alternative proposed form and with the alternative proposed wording. That concludes my submissions, Mr. Mayor.
Did you have a video? Someone sent me a video and I couldn't open it.
There was a video, I can talk to that. There was a video. The video was in further evidence of the flooding at one particular point along the proposed pathway. It shows significant flooding, which is common cause, right? I think we can resend it to you. We can send it to you in an easier to view.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Maybe you can,
Look,
yeah.
it was an attachment to something I got, which I couldn't open. Okay, can we'll watch it now then if you don't mind.
And this was this month, I believe. Am I right? Yeah, 3 weeks ago. There's a picture at the back of the submissions as well, while you look at this, that was taken on the confluence between two of the properties, where there is the top of a fence sticking out that high, and that is on the bicycle path as well. This was by no means an extremely catastrophic flood. This has started to become known as the average flood.
So, where are these videos taken from? I'm sorry, we're not in council now, so I'm happy to. So they're the properties further to the south.
So actually the 43 is one lot number and it goes on both sides of the river. We have our own access bridge, so that pathway will have to go over our driveway, cutting off our access to our own house.
So you're the owners.
What you see there is all the flooding and heading up towards the south.
That's Barrel South on one side of that flooding there. I have a similar video from 19 to Cyclone. Unfortunately, you can't see the next snap video. It's completely underwater. But it's quite a long.
So are you the owners of some of the properties where the council would have to negotiate purchase? Thank you.
Yeah, everybody in the room here whose name is also on the submissions are all people that would have to have land expropriated.
And others.
So you would suggest there's more than the 6 or 7 noted in the report?
I'm not sure. Perhaps you want to talk to that?
My land's already being appropriate.
Yeah, I only know of the 6. Well, there are 10 people affected because some of the properties have more than one owner.
Yeah,
So
but
there's dual
but
ownership.
in law you only talk about the property, not the
Yeah.
the owners, and that's.
We have a number of easements across the river as well for services. And they're not about to come with easements.
We also have our power and, our water and gas going over our bridge and over the proposed one. They've got over through that or over it or worked out an hour to do it anyway. And also our neighbours feel that. So the work in that, diagram, I suppose, of all the properties there, cutting off our access to our own house.
to happen.
When you say west, are you saying further away from the riverbank?
Yes.
Right.
Look,
Well,
when I got the letters on the weekend, I went down on Monday, and actually Tuesday morning, to Tickley. Is it called Tickley Lane? Tirrakee
I think
Lane.
it is, yeah.
And I couldn't understand how a pathway would be seen from there.
Okay, so let's sort of separate any submissions from Tirrakee Lane. Those are not these particular respondents that I am addressing on behalf of, right? The respondents I'm addressing are those who own the lots that are contemplated for expropriation. Addressing your question directly, a solution that involves placing the bicycle path above the flood line for a number of the lots would take the proposition to the realm of ridiculous, as the floods inundate the vast majority of the land. Essentially then, you're not expropriating a strip of land for a path, you are taking away the vast majority of the lots. Because of what the flood study will tell you, those floods inundate the vast majority of the property. So you don't have a solution that is take 4/5 of the property in order to put the bicycle path above the flood line. What you would have is a solution, sorry, just bear with me a sec, what you would have is a solution that is the building of a bicycle path a metre above the current ground. Sorry, there was some, yeah?
There is sufficient road reserve to come from Cecil Hoskins up along Rossvale Road to the park at Heritage Park Road, and then to cut across the back of the park.
Yeah.
And then to come back in to Sutherland Park. So
I don't, that wouldn't accord with the vision as I read it in the 2008 report. But look, in relation to the matters, so Mr. Kendi, you've spoken, you're saying for the owners of the properties that where the council may or may not, it will depend on negotiations, potentially purchase bits of property off or
That's
get
correct.
easements.
That's
Okay.
correct.
So Mr. Norris and Mrs. Smith, are you potential property owners or from the lane?
We own the property, 47 Heritage Park Road.
Okay. Okay. Well, in relation, so I'll hear you in a second, and you.
We own the property 31, but the land on the river has already been taken and used up.
Probably an endeavour to achieve this vision that I don't know, but this has been on the books for a long time. Mr.
Kennelly.
Kennelly, in relation to you're talking about unfunded projects and the like, it's my understanding that this is coming onto the business papers now to authorise the council staff to start and talk. Because prior to that, they had no authorisation. And again, I call them developer contributions, but the way I read this report is the intent of the report is to work out whether this is achievable and cost-wise and construction-wise and environmentally wise and every other wise, and then to see whether there's potential for developer contributions to pay for it. It is not suggested in my reading of the report that the money for this comes from the general fund at the expense of any other of the projects. And you're 100% right. There's a lot of unfunded stuff here, and we'll deal with that in a minute. So,
Can I maybe, sorry, apologies. Can I maybe just read from the council budget implications section of the agenda item? It is anticipated council budget implications can be mitigated with monetary contributions from the new Section 711 contribution plan for Bowral South. So that's pretty open-ended. It doesn't give us much comfort, to be honest.
I suppose it's how you read it. Look, there's potential for council to take loans. Look, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but the council, because I won't be here, is a reality. Elected council will be dealing with this matter. But there's potential for council to take loans, and as Bowral South opens, the developer contributions will be collected, which would pay for that. But look, we're a long way from anything like that. So,
and I think maybe, to a certain extent, I thank you for that viewpoint, because in a way it actually resonates with what we're saying. Nobody has money for wasted expenditure, right? Neither you, me, or the council. And the sooner you can get to whether this is a viable project, the better. But there are certain things that are pretty obvious, right? And there are certain steps that appear to be missing. And we are definitely putting the cart before the horse. If you're planning to open negotiations with the property owners, that indicates that you've made the decision, that you're proceeding. It's the last thing that you should be doing. You should be checking the viability of this project, first of all, on a number of different heads of argument before you even begin that process. That's really is the last thing you do. Or possibly is one of the sub-points, which is, look, we also need to know roughly what it's going to cost us for the expropriation. But if you look at what is written, it basically says, we want to start this process of engaging with you in order to negotiate the price. And that's, by your own words, you're nowhere near that. So this thing is upside down. It's not been well thought out, and all of the reasonably necessary steps before you can get to that point are getting short shrift. There's buried down somewhere in halfway through the report is, we intend to do some due diligence in the future.
well, I won't be criticising the staff for the process they've taken, because in my view, they're being open and transparent, and they're not racing off and doing stuff which residents may then find out about through other means. They're being upfront, but they're only looking at the project. But anyhow, okay, anything else you want to say?
No, that's it. I just urge you to relook at the reworded motion.
I will, if you hand it up to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And consider passing that if you don't kill it right away.
Well, I won't be killing it because that's not my role. It's been on the papers for a long time. Tough.
There you go. That's highlighted section there.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Norris, you'd like to come forward, thanks?
I've just driven down Elizabeth Street and the potholes are gone. It's wonderful. Congratulations. Whoever's responsible.
Which Elizabeth Street? Every town up here seems to have one.
I've got a note here that says my name is Annie Norris. Well, it's not. That's my wife. She actually owns the property, it's in her name. But we've been there for a long time, nearly 50 years. I think Valance's covered a lot of what I would have said, or what she would have said. But I'll just sort of go through the note. The report recommends that the council seek delegation of authority to the general manager to commence negotiations for strategic riverfront land, etc. Now, I think this point's just been touched on. The purpose seems slightly at odds with the recommendation in the sense that the purpose talked about entering negotiations or commencing negotiations about the possible acquisition, whereas the recommendation put it the other way. It said due diligence and possible acquisition, which seemed a more sensible way to go about it. So it seems to me that well, if one had an objection, it would be to the wording of the approach. That there's an inconsistency between one might say there's an inconsistency between the purpose and the recommendation. Subtle, but nevertheless it seems to me it's there. Needless to say, I can't get the computer to work. But these speaking notes were forwarded to the council yesterday. I suppose the difficulty that the owners face, the 6 owners, is that if it's not a question of whether negotiations have started or not. Once it's out in the community that there are the possibility of negotiations to acquisition or compulsory acquisition of some of these properties, it's out there. Now, if you happen to have your house on the market, you've just suddenly, you have to declare that, and you've suddenly impacted the value of the property. So I think, and if you said, well, it's going to be a long time before anything happens, you know, we've got to look, we've got to do this, we've got to do this, that could leave people in limbo for a very long time. And I think that's a pressing problem, particularly if your property was on the market, which my wife's is, because she's incapacitated and she can't do all the things that she used to do, and, you know, we have to move into a smaller house. So that's my particular problem, but that, in effect, would affect all those properties. I know I'm not allowed to ask questions, but rhetorically one might say, a decision to acquire part or any part of the land is a decision that can't be delegated. It's actually made by the council.
I'll be quite frank, I have, even hearing Mr. Keneally, I have no problem with the current recommendation because it's very clear it's not a done deal. And it authorises the General Manager not to purchase the land or run, or I say the General Manager, it's the staff, it's a section that deals with that. But it doesn't allow purchases or anything like that. They're things that have got to go back to the council to be determined. This is the council being very open, honest and transparent, and in my view, prior to March 2021, this place lacked that.
Well, it certainly did. It's unfortunate that the recommendation was worded in the way it was. Had the recommendation just been the council should investigate the feasibility of putting the river pathway in, nobody would have had a problem. The problem's introduced by the words, and think about negotiating compulsory acquisition of river frontage land. That creates limbo.
Well, how do you put the walkway in without finding where the land lies with the owners? That's the catch-22.
Well, I think first of all you would have to work out how you're going to put the pathway in. Do you want to put the pathway in? Is it feasible? And then you say, well, it is feasible if we take 100 metres or 250 metres of that block and 10 metres of that block, so forth and so forth. Then you know what you're dealing with. Then you presumably can approach the owners and say, listen, this is a great idea. We've got the engineers, we know how we're going to do it, and we would like to purchase, appropriate, whatever the word is, X metres of your land. Well, then you're dealing with something concrete, but at the moment the council doesn't have a clue how much they would want to appropriate because they just don't know. But they've come out and said, oh, well, we're going to appropriate some, and it seems to me it's totally premature.
Oh. Well, I beg to differ. This is, and look, I shouldn't be engaging in question and answer, but I think this is important for residents to understand where the council is coming from. It's an opportunity that arises by virtue of what's going to happen at Bowral South. And people used to say to me, why is the council investing so much money down near the Bong Bong River Bridge?
Oh, I can see why.
Where that new playground is and the toilets and going. Well, it's halfway.
Yep.
You'll be able to go, if the dream comes to a reality, from, in effect, Burradoo railway station all the way around to, I suppose, Bong Bong Racecourse. In the public interest, that is a huge benefit. But as I say, it's been on the books since 2007, 2008. This is an opportunity to take it forward, but it doesn't authorise the general manager or the staff to go racing ahead of themselves. It's just putting it out there for the public that this is now seriously being looked at to align with a decision the council took back in 2008.
With respect, the 2008 strategy document is a long document, and my read of it is it does not recommend a river path. It recommends just about everything else. Somewhere in the proceedings prior to that, somebody's drawn a green line around the river and said informal pathway, but when you read the report, nowhere in the report does it recommend that path. And there's 147 submissions to that report, and they're all quoted in the back, and not one of those on my read said anything about that path. Sorry, 3 of them did, but they weren't supporting it. They just said, how do you get out of it if you want to exit? So
I have no doubt the officer, when he introduces this item to council, will address that matter you raise. Anything else you wanted to say, or?
No, I think that's right. Oh, well, I would only add those pictures that you saw. You didn't actually see pictures of our property, which was exactly the same. It's totally inundated from boundary to boundary, about halfway up the property from the river.
Oh, look, there is no question in the 3 years or bit over that I've been here, I think there's been, in effect, floods 3 times in those areas. And they're matters that in the due diligence, I would imagine would be addressed.
Well, with respect, there's been more than 3.
Well, there's been 3 big ones. So where I think we've been declared a natural disaster area a few times. And I could be wrong, but I just see it as I drove across the Bong Bong Bridge there and think
absolutely. So you're not.
There's a lot of water.
A lot of water on our properties. I suppose it's totally inappropriate, but if you've got the EGM following here, what is the possibility of changing the wording and omitting the words negotiating purchase of those bits of property?
Well, I think it's important to the decision that it can't happen unless the council finds out whether they can negotiate. It may be at the end of the day it's compulsory acquisition. I don't know. That's a long way away.
Yep. But as I said, it still leaves all those property owners in limbo.
I appreciate that.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Smith, I think it was. Yes, Mrs. Smith.
I just applied.
Oh, it's your call. If you don't, if you think there's been enough said.
No, but can I transfer my speaking to Naomi Pierce?
Oh, look, I don't. Yes. Feel free.
Hello, I'm Naomi Pierce Coates from 12 Cherokee Lane. I've sent you a number of flooding in the area.
I'm sorry, can you just start again?
Naomi Pierce Coates.
Yep.
12 Cherokee Lane. I've sent a number of letters, including very detailed letters, and haven't received a response. I'd just like to start by saying that you're completely misinformed to suggest that the properties have flooded 3 times in 3 years.
Can I just say that's an observation I made? I had no professional input into that from the officers. That's
It
just
is
something
a
that I said
It is
that
a
I
little
saw.
concerning that that would come out of your mouth, bearing in mind the proposal. I'd like to tell you that since I've lived in the property, 12 Cherokee Lane, which is the high point of the proposed Bowral South development, has flooded a number of times. Our barn has flooded 3 times, including a number of instances where the toilets have backed up and our sewage system, which has a storage tank, has overflowed onto the streets and that has crossed our neighbour's property. Toilet paper littered down the road. There is a serious contamination issue here that you are clearly not informed about, notwithstanding the fact that we have written to you and informed you about it. I'd like to just make 3 points which were the subject of my letter to you on Sunday. The first thing, Cherokee Lane residents recommend removal of item 8.1 from the extraordinary general meeting today. The community found out about this on Friday, although you said this has been on the papers for a long period of time. We've had 3 working days essentially to gather our thoughts, which are imperfect and incomplete, but you've been thinking about this for a long time. The first thing is to say is that council is about to enter caretaker mode. Now, what you're doing as one of your last decisions or recommendations is that somebody be authorised to engage in conduct that you can't engage in caretaker mode. So with all due respect, this is a crazy 11th hour recommendation to engage in conduct that shouldn't be engaged in at all. Caretaker mode begins in August and then we're going to an election. And so our position is that this should be deferred until there is an elected council who take the time to hear from the residents, who give us more than 3 days to consider a proposal of this nature and magnitude, and who respond to our concerns about what is being proposed. It's premature to empower the General Manager to commence such negotiations in advance of acceptance and approval of the proposed Bowral South development plan. It is inappropriate to present this agenda relating to the Bowral Riverfront Greenway for independent consideration to the proposed draft Bowral South development plan when it's readily apparent that the decisions directly relate to and impact the proposed Bowral South development plan. With respect, it's a sham to put them together as separate agenda items. They stand and fall together, and is misleading to the public and demonstrates a lack of the community's trust in council to propose them separately. It's inappropriate to present item 8.1 of the extraordinary general meeting without due consideration of community, environmental, heritage, agricultural, social, cultural, economic impacts, and the risks associated with the pathways in the course of floodwaters for use by children. We note in the agenda notes, no specific community engagement has been undertaken as part of this report. No external communication or consultation has been conducted. The environmental impact of this project will be assessed and considered at a later stage. The social implications of the proposed Bowral Riverfront Greenway will be assessed and taken into account at a later stage. The broader economic implications of realising the Bowral Riverfront Greenway will be identified and assessed at a later stage. The cultural implications of the Bowral Riverfront Greenway will be identified and assessed at a later stage. All direct quotes. It's inappropriate for the administrator to delegate authority to the General Manager absent community consultation in advance of due diligence and during this period of administration. These are decisions with significant consequences which ought to be made by elected council members with all due diligence and care following extensive periods of community consultation. On behalf of the residents in Cherokee Lane, Burrardee and most present, who I will invite to say here if they agree with me, we request that you remove item 8.1 from the EGM of council proposed for today, deferring it for consideration by elected council together with the Bowral South development. If you agree, please say here. Does anyone here agree with me?
Yes. Okay, anything else?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to be heard about this matter? Okay. The next speaker is Jennifer Slattery in relation to some of the recommendations on the draft operational plan and budget.
Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Council on the draft budget, especially the reporting that's gone down to the service level areas, or I believe that's called level 4. And I'd like to thank Viv for championing having that in there. It's actually made the document a lot more engaging than perhaps previous documents, and a lot more easier for people who don't have the background to understand what's going on with all these budgets, especially since it's a very complex document. I also like the commentary that goes with it, and I like the reporting of what are the reports that inform our works. It sort of brings a lot of loose ends together of this is what we're doing. So I really applaud Council for doing that. I also like the unfunded list that comes out, because it gives the community an idea of all the different things that we're trying to get funding for and what we're competing for, and there's a lot that's outstanding. So it gives a little bit more context to unfunded. The bit that I'd like to talk about is unfunded, and my interest is in recreational walking tracks. So I had a look at the report when it came out and noted that not one of the service areas actually had the walking track strategy as a document that informs their work. And I kind of went, oops, it had a little bit of a red flag for me. I did note that we do have capital expenditure being applied to Box Vale, Mount Alex and Mount Gib, which is great, but where it's lacking is the maintenance work. And in the report that came back from the council staff, and I'd like to say that was great getting those reports back, to have that context of you put your work in and here's your response, I found that really helpful. But what I'd like to address is the unfunded maintenance, and I understand the reason why it's unfunded for that is because there isn't a dedicated team or an allocated team to do the works. So I know that the bush care team removes trees and does a little bit of minor works in a reactive thing. So to me that's like, you know, a tree falls down on a fire trail or a tree falls down on a road, it's fallen down on a walking track, they get removed. I'm not talking about that kind of maintenance. So I would like council, so I'll go back a little bit. So this came up last year as well, and it was the same, pretty much the same response. There isn't a dedicated team, so we haven't got maintenance budgeted for it because there's no dedicated team. We come to this year, it's on the unfunded list again because there's no dedicated or allocated team and there's no funding. So I'm kind of guessing that if we don't get a dedicated or allocated team to do maintenance, I'll be here in 12 months' time going, guess what? It's on, the maintenance is still on there. And these are facilities that we have that people really enjoy. We have, you know, the surveys that go out and saying walking is something that loads of people in the Shire do. It ranks up high in the recreational facilities that we do. So my request is that council looks at having an allocated or dedicated team for maintenance for the recreational walking tracks, and that it's funded adequately. Whether it's the $100,000 or whether it's something else, I don't know. I also note that the Parks and Gardens teams used to do maintenance on the walking tracks during winter when they had some free time, but that has ceased and they're allocated to other duties. They're fully allocated now. But what seems to have happened is the works that they were doing, which was wonderful, just doesn't happen anymore. So that's my thing, is I'd like to see the maintenance of walking track trails get a dedicated team or an allocated team so we can get some funding assigned to it and get the maintenance work done on those tracks.
Thank you for your complimentary comments to start with. I think, or I know, it's been a massive project to get to where the council is today. I've said this many times, but this was a very bad example of a good local government area. And the work that the staff have put in to develop down to level 4, I hope will win back the trust of the community. It should, and the work that's also done in the asset management plans, and the fact that these budgets, like I don't want to take, the staff will probably talk about this more later, but just from my reading of it, the fact that you can now look at these budget papers and see in effect what's going to happen in the next 4 years is putting the council ahead of the pack in local government now. And the General Manager tells me that in the life of the next council, residents will be able to go onto the website and look at where projects are up to dollar-wise, which, you know, the software provides for that. But look, back to your walking tracks, there's one big plus that's happened in the last financial year. I don't know whether it's because of your urging, but they've done a complete audit on walking tracks, which is now available. And perhaps you should speak to Mr. Robinson later. I know that there's a group of people who already has been made available to them. And this is how you then, through informed decision making, you can make informed decisions, not what you know it's who you know decisions, for allocation of funds. So, you know, I'd suggest you speak to Mr. Robinson. He will also be able to address what you're talking about when he presents his side of the budget. But I think there is some money in there for walking tracks, and for visitation in this shire, and visitation is important to this shire's economy, these tracks are very important. But there's also, I think, outstanding claims with the state government for damage that has been done in the storms to these tracks as well. It's all been repaid, has it?
Walking tracks don't fall under the central public asset.
Where the Boxvale track, weren't we waiting for some claims on that, or we got to pay for it ourselves? Yeah, well, that's part of the audit. So, you know, thanks for that. And I'm actually happy to meet with you and have a chat about the walking tracks, because I agree with you. But finding the money is the problem, because you've got to take something out to put something in.
Well, with regards to the money, one of the actions that was on the recreational walking track strategy is a stewardship program. And just from anecdotal stuff, so I can't say that this would happen, there seems to be in the community a lot of people with goodwill who would love to help manage the walking tracks, and whether it's doing a bit of maintenance, you know, clipping back a bit of overgrown material or what have you, or doing some basic minor works. I suggest that there might be quite a lot of goodwill out there, and people would, like the Bush Care program, be involved with maintaining the walking tracks, because people love them.
Look, I don't want to sound negative, but the Bowral Rotary Club has been talking to me about potentially helping, but liability issues, Australian standard issues, it makes life hard. But look, I'm happy to meet with you and the council officers and see what we can come forward with. But I think that a big plus is this audit that's been done. I'm surprised you didn't know about it.
I know about it now. Thank you.
Next item, Mr. Scandrett wants to talk about the budget.
Up to date at the moment.
I apologise that the...
So are we going to discuss the bicycle path again in any way?
Yes, at council.
At council?
When the council meeting was supposed to start 20 minutes ago, but I take the view that residents should be heard in a respectful manner, and that's why I let the time go over. So there's 2 more speakers for matters, and then we'll go into council.
My apologies.
That's
I will stick around.
yeah. Look,
This is the first for me.
yeah. Well, people who come to council meetings, it's normally their first experience in dealing with the council too.
Not mine. But anyway, former councillor and former deputy mayor Ian Scandrett, 2012 to 2020.
Yeah, we can do without the commentary, just the question, please.
Oh, I thought you wanted that on the tape. Mr. May, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to applaud the staff through the General Manager for the quality of the budget report. It's outstanding. I have a couple of points to make in relation to one item, and I wrote to the Acting Director of Corporate Strategy and Resourcing about this, which is the outdoor fitness centres, as they were known, and of which we've built 3 as a consequence to earlier activity on this, namely at the pool at Bowral, namely also at Renwick in part, and also down at Lake Alexandra in part. This was a resolution of council in around 2014. I'm unable to quote exactly when, but your records will find that, I'm sure. It came through the Sport and Rec Committee and a draft budget meeting from there, and then came into main council. At the time, there were 13 proposed across the Shire of these outdoor fitness centres at a cost then of around $33,000 each. They were very well received, and my point here is today that I'm dismayed to have realised that they're not in the report. They're not in the unfunded, and in my looking at what records I have, I can't find when they've been taken out. I'd like you to look into that if you don't mind, Mr. May, and come back. The second thing I just wanted to raise was...
Can we deal with with that one first?
Sure.
Yeah. It's noted in the papers that the staff can't find it either. So it's obviously dropped off under the old administration, but Mr. Robinson was saying to me today that they're still trying to find something. But you can imagine the work that's gone on in what they've done to date.
Sure. Well, it for example, gets a mention in the agenda of the Sport and Recreation Committee, 30th of October 2014. Yeah. Which was a draft agenda, Mr. Robinson. So anyhow, it gets there, and it turns up regularly in there, and as I say, 3 have been built. So if you go backwards from there, but what worries me obviously here is that it's dropped off, and it needed a resolution of council, specific resolution of council to drop it off. I know that others have spoken about the amendment to the unfunded projects list, which something I had a big hand in 2016, getting that list formalised so we didn't have to do it every year. I know you've supported that, Mr. May, and kept that project list going, but it was only a couple of years ago, it was at $630 million, including all of the unfunded projects that had been the subject of council resolutions, and of course the staff wish list and other sources. It was a good budget tool because it gave us an idea of, the scope of what needed to be done. I was on council when we got the special rate variation back in 2014, and we were in trouble then, and that was unfortunately I don't think carried out very well under the administration at the time, but it is a telling system. I would prefer to see all of the items that were taken out 2 months ago, about 500 million of them, dollars worth of them, put back in as a monitoring system, and a lot of those were staff observations on approaching infrastructure or overdue infrastructure. I mean, even in there was, for example, survey equipment, and I think, the cameras for the rangers might have been in there, or that might have been a couple of terms, a couple of years ago. Things, small things, and of course the big things like Mossvale Bypass. So my request to you is to, look into the outdoor fitness centre matter and bring that back, and secondly, through the GM, I would encourage the administration to reinstate the unfunded projects list, or whatever you want to call it, in whatever form, because I think it's a good, valuable monitoring tool And online searchable resolutions of council would help with matters like this, because all the notices of motion and the outcomes, you have that system, but it's not available to the...
Look, Mr. Scandrett, Rome wasn't built in a day. You know what I inherited.
Indeed. I just also wanted to make a couple of general comments, if I may. I note Wollongong Council, we were told by Gordon Bradbury of this, of course, they publish their agenda 12 days in advance, 1.5 weeks in advance. And I think that's an applaudable thing now, particularly seeing we're doing monthly meetings. There's no reason why we can't do that. You can do late items. Secondly, I think the public forum speakers and topics should be online the day before, i.e. yesterday morning, so that people are interested in...
Look, it's not an election speech. If you can just talk about the budget.
It was suggested over here that 3 days was too short.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
that's not what you listed to talk about. You listed to talk about the budget.
And on the matter of the cycle walking trail along the river, I'd encourage people to have a look at the business item in 2016 when the 7 10-acre locks opposite Briars were approved. It destroyed the green between theory at the time, which was a fundamental of council, but it did include some comment about a cycle walkway along the river and property acquisition to do with that.
I should have rung you earlier today.
Experience.
Because I was asking about that. I see those buildings going up down there at the moment. Okay, is that it?
Yes, and I just wanted to let you know that I understand there's been an amendment to the very controversial Woolies development in
Look,
Moscow.
I've not. That's not what we're here for today.
but
No, please.
I'm not going to speak on it. Just
No, I
to
don't
say
want you to. I don't want to hear about it because it's not listed.
It's not on the tracker, that's right.
Mr. Aston, talking in relation to the Visitor Economy Advisory Panel.
Thank you, Jeff Aston, sit on a couple of local associations. Mr Administrator, our region sits amongst the most populated cities in New South Wales. We are the closest premium food and wine region to Sydney, effectively Sydney's cellar door. For the past 15 years, we have not done it right and got it right at the council level. For the past 15 years, we have had a council with a top-down approach, where industry were not involved, we were just given. Our visitor economy is at breaking point. On the front line of this economic crisis and on the back of a disastrous few years, people are holding on by their fingertips. This panel has the opportunity to give hope. What has happened gives the reverse. Industry have worked towards this advisory panel for 5 years. There is great examples of the potential, as seen in regions like the Orange region, if it's done right. Unfortunately, this selection process reeks of the old council top-down approach. It is not right. In December 23, council resolved to establish a visitor economy advisory panel of representatives of industry subsectors. The advisory panel was set up to represent local industry. However, the selection panel lacked the appropriate local knowledge to select candidates to deliver the outcome of the advisory panel. We have just one chance to get this right. We have an amazing tourism GM and the industry needs to get behind her. To do this, industry needs to trust and feel that the advisory panel truly represents them, which in its current state it does not. Some of the key requirements highlighted in the expressions of interest were understand opportunities relevant to the Southern Highlands, work constructively as a team, and demonstrate an ability to consider the whole of the Southern Highlands. Due to the omission of the Tourism and Events Coordinator, the selection panel was made up entirely of outsiders. Whilst the panel may well have carried many credentials, the selection members were either outside of the tourism sector or outside of the region. Those within the tourism sector were not only outside of the region, but were also from regions that are not considered wine regions and do not understand the significance of Southern Highlands being the closest premium wine region to Sydney, Wollongong and Canberra, outside of its own region. This is reflected in the members put forward. It begs belief that DSSS were not involved in the selection. They are independent and have strong local knowledge of local operators. With no local tourism knowledge, I question the panel's capability to correctly ascertain the ability of the applicants to be true representatives of the industry subsectors. I question the panel's ability to correctly ascertain the capability of the applicants to consider the whole of the Southern Highlands. I question the panel's ability to correctly ascertain the capability of the applicants to work constructively as a Southern Highlands team with the Southern Highlands operators. It seems to me that the best way to ascertain the applicants' abilities to represent the industry subsectors and represent the tourism operators in the Southern Highlands would be to have some level of involvement with those subsectors and operators, or at the very least involve someone that has some knowledge in the selection process. At no stage has this occurred. Without industry engagement and without members on the selection panel who are actively engaged with industry subsectors and tourism operators in our region, how is it possible for the Council to establish a visitor advisory panel of representatives of the industry subsectors? I put to the Council that they reconvene a local selection committee, or at the very least that the committee includes the DSSS General Manager, who is independent and has the broadest knowledge of the whole region and what makes the region tick. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, as you know, I deferred this matter at the last meeting, and I spent considerable time on the weekend reading the submissions, the point scoring, the probity advice. We took further probity advice, so we'll deal with this matter at the council. Thank you.
Okay.
Does anybody else wish to be heard about any matter on the business papers? Okay, we take a 5-minute break and start at 4:10.